On that particular night, Dorian Ellison became more than just himself. He was Isla's quirky relative. Her casual remark, delivered with a light tone, seemed almost inconsequential. Yet, it was the way our associates responded that clarified the situation for me. After all, I had footed half the bill for the catering, the floral decorations, and the signature drinks Isla insisted upon to make the event unforgettable, an occasion she would remember, perhaps, but not necessarily myself. I was the accompaniment, the prop, the figure relegated to the corner with a smile and a casual wave. "Oh, that's just my cousin. He's somewhat peculiar, hailing from the western regions." I didn't dispute her. I didn't attempt to hide my discomfort or feign amusement. Instead, I stood there, clutching a glass of effervescent beverage, observing Isla as she gracefully navigated the room, exhibiting the skill and allure of a seasoned performer. She was adept at this. Charming, captivating. Her eyes gleamed with feigned curiosity as she inquired about ventures and quarterly benchmarks, surrounded by the carefully curated crowd that she meticulously selected. The young executive with an extravagant watch and overzealous smile eventually posed the question, "So, what's your name, and what do you do?" I could sense Isla's gaze on me before I even turned my head. It was sharp, expectant, almost desperate. "Say little," her look seemed to implore. "Avoid embarrassment." I cleared my throat and spoke, allowing my voice to carry through the small circle. "I am Ellison," I said. "Dorian Ellison." The name resonated like a flame on dry brush. A pause ensued, followed by a ripple. Bertrand Wexley, Isla's superior, the man she frequently honored in dinner discussions, visibly froze mid-sip. His eyes widened, and he attempted to conceal it, but I knew enough about boardrooms to recognize fear. "Ellison," he echoed, whispering as if testing his memory. In Ellison dynamics, the ensuing quietness was stark, reminiscent of a razor's edge, a silence that pierced masks. I remained expressionless, neither smiling nor offering a wink or nod, suggesting falsehood. Instead, I maintained eye contact and responded simply, "Yes." In that instant, I was no longer Isla's peculiar cousin. I was not the man lurking in the corner. I became the name every individual in that room acknowledged, even if they didn't know it was me. Wexley gripped his glass tightly, and I noticed Julian Vale, the marketing director with her polished LinkedIn profile, scrutinize her phone for recent merger speculations. Greg Morrill, the operations vice president, who once dubbed me Isla's silent partner in sweatpants, seemed to squint as if he had misunderstood reality. And Isla? Her smile wavered. Her formerly confident voice faltered like a candle in the wind. She moved nearer, attempting to regain control of the story. "Ah, Dorian, I didn't know you'd met Bertrand," she said, her voice overly cheerful. Her thoughts seemed audible as she hastily attempted to mend the situation. I responded calmly, "No, we haven't been formally introduced." A moment of quiet ensued, filled with the silence that accompanied me in every room she previously controlled. Wexley coughed, his voice quivering. "Ellison Dynamics. It's the company that owns." He trailed off, realizing too late that he had spoken aloud. I didn't interrupt the quietness. The room took on the task instead, allowing the gravity of my name and its implications to fill every nook and cranny she once easily influenced. Isla's lips tightened, revealing the fear reflected in her eyes. The same fear I'd seen in numerous boardrooms when the silent man in the corner turned out to be the one with the decisive signature. I didn't have to yell or show credentials or cite financial figures. Throughout my life, I constructed Ellison Dynamics upon a base of being underestimated, of being an unexpected figure until it was too late for others. That night, at Isla's intricately designed gathering, I tired of embodying the role she had crafted for me. The atmosphere changed subtly, a chill passing as laughter morphed into queries, then quietude, eventually transforming into something else entirely. A handful of people edged nearer, their eyes wide, abandoning their drinks. Our gazes locked, mine calm and steady. For the first time that night, Isla seemed diminished. She attempted to regain her footing, her voice elevated and tense. "Ah, Dorian has always been something of an enigma." I allowed her no conclusion. "Not a mystery," I stated. "Simply a man who knows when to talk." With that said, I took a sip from my glass. No applause, no explosions, no dramatic exit. Just a quiet sip, unwavering and silent, as the room pondered the story they'd unwittingly entered. Isla's laughter never echoed in that chamber again, not as it had before. As for me, I remained the same. In the stillness, my quietude conveyed my thoughts. Unusually, I didn't resent being the focal point. Isla often minimized me, particularly in settings where she sought control. She'd perfected the strategic laughter, the tilt of her head, and the timely sparkle in her eyes. From my vantage point, I've witnessed the choreography of her social performances, understanding the measured pace and precise execution of each move. Her wine glass was held like a symbol of power, every action deliberate, each word sculpted for maximum impact. She was a natural performer, a woman capable of commanding a room with a mere raised eyebrow. Initially, I admired this quality. At one point, I was content to be the behind-the-scenes figure, the silent partner ensuring bills were paid and the foundation solid while she flew high on her self-constructed wings. I wanted her to shine, to astound the world with her relentless ambition. In the course of events, she transitioned from allowing me to stand by her side to utilizing me as an accessory. It was that evening when I recognized this change, more distinctly than I had ever allowed myself to acknowledge. She chuckled boisterously at a jest about her quirky relative, then flashed a smile suggesting play acting. A facade, a performance. I sipped my drink, the carbonation coating my tongue, while maintaining a polite, subdued, ornamental smile. She sought me as a prop, secure, unremarkable, incapable of overshadowing her in a setting where she desired all attention on herself. Isla found me too reserved for her tastes, too cautious, too triumphant in ways she couldn't exhibit ostentatiously. My victories were not the type you could display on a vision board or boast about over brunch. They consisted of agreements sealed behind closed doors and innovations that altered lives in ways she had never endeavored to comprehend. She enjoyed success with its accompanying limelight, where she could gracefully enter, hair styled, lips curled, ready for acclaim. Yet, I was her stand-in, the individual who drove her to the airport, handled her luggage, mended the bathroom's dripping faucet fixtures she omitted from her friends' anecdotes. I was the man she excluded from the spotlight because I didn't align with the self-crafted image she had created for herself, and I allowed it to continue. For far too long, I allowed it. I remained at the room's periphery, the dialogue whirling around me like an unfamiliar dance routine. People moved past me, expressions eager and radiant, voices rising and falling in rehearsed climaxes. I saw the same look in their eyes that I had seen during business meetings on the brink of a deal. Hungry, strategic, polite enough to conceal greed. I noticed Isla's gaze from afar as she captivated a group of men in tailored attire. She leaned in, her hand on one man's jacket sleeve, her laughter floating high and saccharine. In a mere half-second, our eyes locked, granting me a glimpse of discomfort and uncertainty flashing across hers. Perhaps she'd picked up on the shift following Wexley's question, or noticed how the room transformed once my surname fell to the floor like a discarded match. She turned back to her crowd, transforming that uneasy expression into one radiating warmth and welcoming. However, I detected a shudder in her hands as she gestured. A decorative silence was her decree for me tonight. I was the silent figure in the corner, the one who could pat on the shoulder like a cherished pet when the merriment became too boisterous. I had sensed this before, at gatherings, at events, even during family celebrations where my purpose was to fill the voids, to embellish her narrative. I let it continue because I thought it was love, because I believed that standing by her meant staying inconspicuous. At that instant, as the celebration continued amidst me and my name cast shadows over every discussion, I came to understand the magnitude of what I had sacrificed by remaining silent. Wexley's laughter was now filled with unease, his voice constricted as he attempted to redirect the conversation towards safer topics. Yet, there was no way to trap the genie back into the bottle. The name was exposed, power dynamics had shifted, and not even the polished executives in the room could ignore the quiver in his speech. Greg Morrill made an attempt to lighten the mood with a feeble joke about being part of tech royalty, but it failed to elicit laughter. No one chuckled. I saw Islaw's lips form a thin line, her eyes darting towards me then away, as if she feared looking the man she called cousin in the eye. I felt no rage and no satisfaction. I was simply done. Done with playing the role she had scripted for me. Done being the silent backdrop that allowed her monologue to go uncontested. Moving past being her convenient prop when it suited her, and then being discarded when it didn't, she finally ambled over, her demeanor forced and artificial. "Dorian," she said, feigning sweetness, her voice mirroring our old charade. "Could you fetch me a drink?" Her demand echoed the familiar game. I fixed my gaze on hers, neither blinking nor wavering. "You can get it yourself." Her smile faltered, seeking someone else to play her loyal servant. But no one stepped forward. The room seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for me to speak again. Yet I remained silent, allowing the tension to build, thick and oppressive, until it enveloped us like a barrier. Only then did she give me that look, the one she'd used to quell arguments, to remind me of my role in her narrative. But it no longer had its effect. This evening I wasn't the odd relative. I wasn't the man she'd belittled to feel superior. I was Dorian Ellison, the man who'd spent years constructing something she'd never bothered to inquire about. The individual who had observed my transformation in a realm unwilling to accept my genuine self. In that chamber, adorned with her meticulously chosen elegance, I recognized that I'd endured too much of being molded into an imitation. The event thrived, orchestrated by East Law, detailing even the flower arrangements that mirrored the table linens, the subtle background music that effortlessly transitioned from one corporate-friendly playlist to another, and the hand-picked guest list that positioned her as the focal point of every dialogue. I witnessed it all unfold like a well-rehearsed performance, with each participant delivering their lines precisely, each action premeditated. The evening belonged to East Law, constructed with the same precise detail she devoted to her Instagram posts, sharp, polished, and heavily edited. The faces around me merged into identical practiced smiles, gleaming teeth, and smart attire. Bertrand Wexley was the main attraction, the individual she had been courting with dinner invitations and tactical chatter for months. Eastlaw's eyes sparkled whenever she looked at him, her voice adopting a heightened, radiant pitch reserved for those who could aid her ascension. Then there was Julie Ann Vale, the marketing director with her distinctive bob cut and her smirk that she wore like a symbol of achievement. Greg Morrill, the operations vice president, often followed close behind, armed with his rehearsed chuckle and arrogant demeanor that made him sound as if he had invented mockery. I had once observed him speaking over a junior manager with the self-assurance of someone who had never been contradicted. And none of them were aware that I was the founder and dominant shareholder of Ellison Dynamics, the tech conglomerate in merger discussions with Wexley's company. None of them knew that the unremarkable man in the modest dress shirt and understated smile was the one pulling their strings. East Law hadn't inquired about it. Not out of my secrecy, but because it wasn't part of her routine. Never before had she asked. It wasn't in her script. She enjoyed portraying me as a dabbler in startups, someone akin to an amateur with a garage and a dream that never quite materialized. A creative who spent his days brainstorming ideas destined for obscurity. It gave her a sense of superiority, making her feel more ambitious and well-connected, polished compared to me. I allowed it. For years, I tolerated it. But in that moment, as Wexley paused mid-sentence upon mentioning Ellison Dynamics, I understood the fragility of her constructed image. Like delicate china with a barely visible crack that goes unnoticed until it shatters completely. I observed the comprehension dawn on his face, the widening eyes, the stiffened posture, the slight tremor in his hand as he returned the glass to the table. Julian Vale swiftly turned toward me, her eyes sharpening as she grabbed her phone, suggesting an imminent Google search. Ellison Dynamics had been traced. Greg Morrill's countenance changed from casual disregard to one that seemed to have witnessed a specter. And Isla's gaze shifted toward me like a frightened deer, anxiety etching itself across her flawlessly painted features. Her lips parted but remained silent initially. Then she uttered something, a prearranged phrase for such a moment, though she never anticipated having to utter it in reality. "Dorian, you're the founder?" She faltered on the final word, the facade fading bit by bit. I returned her gaze with composure gained from battlegrounds more frigid than this one. Yes, I confirmed succinctly. I am the proprietor of the company assessing Wexley's Q4 acquisition proposal. The words dropped like a storm, silence enveloping the room as laughter faded, as if someone had turned off a switch. Conversations abruptly halted mid-sentence. Glasses hung unmoved. The soft murmur of polite chatter was replaced by an unbearable tension that I could taste, metallic and sharp. Wexley's hand gripped the chair's back, his knuckles turning white. Julian's phone remained frozen in her grasp, its screen illuminating with search results she hesitated to utter aloud. Greg Morrell's jaw worked as if he were chewing on an unswallowable confession. Isla, however, stood motionless, her carefully constructed facade beginning to crumble. Her eyes flickered between me and Wexley, her lips parting as if she might find the words that would restore her flawless storyline. But no words emerged. I let the silence linger. I desired for her to feel it, the fissure in the meticulously constructed foundation, the truth buried beneath the polished tiles and designer footwear. I had established Ellison dynamics from a single thought, a doodle on the back of a coffee shop receipt, and a rental studio apartment with a dripping faucet. I self-funded every penny, inked each deal, endured every tribulation until the firm could survive independently, until I could stand independently. Yet, she never showed curiosity about it. Not once. She never asked what haunted me at night, what my ambitions portrayed, what sacrifices I made to construct the realm she remained oblivious of. She didn't ask because it didn't align with her desired narrative. Now, with a single name, the tale had fractured. I noticed her eyes grow stern then, panic gnawing at the borders of her facade. "Why didn't you inform me?" she breathed, her voice so soft only I could perceive it. Initially, I let the quiet serve as my response. Then I drew closer, maintaining a tranquil, steady tone. "Since you never inquired." She blinked once, twice. Her lips quivered. The crowd continued to watch, the tension palpable, pressing against me. She attempted to smile, but it emerged distorted, a forced grin that failed to touch her eyes. "We should discuss this." "Perhaps another time," she murmured, her tone cheerful yet echoey. I gave a reluctant nod. "Possibly." Yet, I sensed the narrative had already altered irrevocably. For the man she'd strived to conceal emerged from the shadows, exposing fissures in her carefully constructed facade that were beyond mending. And for the first instance in years, I no longer felt like an ancillary character in her tale. Instead, I felt like the author who'd penned the script unnoticed. She failed to peruse the script then, and I walked away, letting silence accompany me like a coronet. It struck me that sometimes the quietest voice in the room holds the power to reshape everything. Bertrand Wexley's complexion paled upon recognition, Ellison as in Ellison dynamics. He didn't attempt to mask the quiver in his speech as he repeated it, seeming to test the words on his tongue, hoping they would taste differently. The ice in his glass tinkled in his grasp, a faint melody that echoed loudly in the sudden stillness. In a silence I hadn't orchestrated with a shout or eloquent speech, but by merely being myself within the room, I became the focus of everyone's gaze. Julie Ann Vale hastily tucked her phone into her bag, her smile strained, as if she'd been reminded of a forgotten obligation. Greg Morrell, who once referred to me as Eslaw's covert partner in sweatpants, seemed taken aback, as though he'd only now recognized that the man in sweatpants was the owner of the company he'd been courting. And Eslaw? Her eyes widened with a hint of panic. Her lips parted, suggesting she might attempt to laugh it off, but no words followed. The silence expanded, resembling an expansive canyon that no well-prepared discourse could mend. Wexley fumbled for words. His voice quivered, too feeble for the room he once dominated. "You mean Ellison from Ellison Dynamics?" He hesitated to continue. The room had already deduced the missing piece of his statement. Everyone realized why the acquisition deal had been halted during review, why their Q4 pitch hadn't advanced to approval. I took a deep breath, maintaining a tranquil facade. Years spent mastering every hint of emotion in a boardroom had prepared me for this moment. Tonight, I allowed that control to envelop me like armor. I locked eyes with Wexley and subtly nodded once, shattering the preconceived notions they held about me. Yes, I admitted, my tone neutral, revealing only the truth. I represent the company conducting your Q4 acquisition review. The statement hung heavy in the air. Conversations ceased abruptly. Laughter dissipated. Even the background jazz music, a polished backdrop that had infused the room with refined sophistication, now seemed too intense, its tones jarring and discordant. Wexley gripped the stem of his wine glass tightly, his knuckles turning pale, flickering between me and Isla, seeking some clarification that could extricate him from this awkward predicament. Dorian stood uneasily, folding his arms and casting a glance at Isla, who appeared stunned. Greg Morrell's gaze was revealing. It seemed as if he'd spotted a new feature on me, disbelief etched deeply across his features. I pondered the number of times he had dismissed me during meals or social gatherings, treating me like an outsider in his realm. Now he couldn't avert his gaze. Isla approached, her voice quivering as she attempted to restore its polished tone. Dorian, you never mentioned. I silenced her with a glance alone, words halted mid-air. She constructs her world with meticulously selected details, manipulating the flow of information to maintain her central role in the story she pens. Tonight, however, that narrative was disrupted. I watched as she wrestled, and I questioned how many times she had overlooked me, considering me harmless enough to ignore. How many times did she suppress my light so hers would gleam more brilliantly? Words weren't necessary for conveying that message. The truth resonated more powerfully than any reproach. Wexley cleared his throat, his voice raspy. Indeed, you should have informed us earlier. I subtly tilted my head, an eyebrow raised. No one had inquired. The words lingered, plain and piercing, cutting through the room like a scalpel. Greg Morrell's mouth opened, but no words emerged. Julian Vale nervously fiddled with her phone. Even the waitstaff seemed to perceive the shift, their polite demeanor wavering as they moved more cautiously around the room's periphery. Eastlaw blushed deeply. She had constructed a narrative in which she was the lead, and I was a harmless backdrop. Tonight, she understood that it was the figure in the shadows who held the last say on every deal we'd ever aspired to seal. I did not gloat. I did not smile. I merely let the silence endure. Wexley attempted to preserve his dignity. Dorian, this alteration alters things. His voice was tense, the anxiety evident. It appears we must go over the purchase conditions. His unease echoing past encounters where he boasted about financial gains and business ventures as if I was inconsequential. I took a sip from my drink, the cool effervescence on my tongue stark against the room's heat. Yes, I replied, my tone calm, almost cordial. We can cover that in an official setting. Not here. His countenance sank. He understood the implications. No more secretive transactions, no more casual negotiations over meals. He would confront me in a boardroom instead, with legalities, statistics, and a table that didn't yield to his charisma. Eastlaw's lips quivered, her eyes imploring. Dorian. I avoided looking at her. I didn't need to. I placed my empty glass on a tray, politely acknowledging the staff as I headed towards the exit. The quiet lingered behind me, a symphony of furtive glances and shattered stories. Eastlaw's voice escalated in distress. Dorian, I halted at the threshold, the silence of the chamber pressing against my spine. I glanced over my shoulder to catch her visage, her meticulously styled, artificially enhanced face, and I spied the fissures within it. Next occasion, I murmured gently, perhaps you should inquire prior to determining another's identity. Her lips parted, tears glistened, but I was already departing. I didn't require her apology. I didn't need her to mend what she'd shattered, for in that instant, abandoning her within the room she constructed, I perceived I'd never required her authorization to be the man I had already become. Following a courteous interval of 10 minutes, I excused myself. No spectacle, no grand exit, merely a tranquil tip of my hat to the staff collecting empty vessels and a subtle sneak through the glass sliding door that Eastlaw asserted increased the patio's apparent size. I was weary of the laughter that had grown brittle, of the gazes that followed me with a blend of dread and fascination, now that my name bore significance they hadn't anticipated. Islaw's voice echoed as I reached for my coat, tense and anxious, tinged with a nervous chuckle. Dorian, hold on. Let's discuss this. I turned slowly, feeling the burden of the room pressing against me. Her smile was a faint imitation of the one she wore when she had introduced me as her eccentric cousin. Now it was difficult for her to find an appropriate expression, somewhere between worry and feigned elegance. Discuss what? I asked softly, keeping my voice collected. I kept it composed because I knew any louder tone would only fuel the chaos. She moved nearer, her heels clicking on the marble floor like a metronome signaling something she couldn't quite manage. Why didn't you inform me about Ellison Dynamics? About the acquisition discussions? About all of this? I maintained the silence, as I often did in boardrooms when competitors made their first offer and I knew they'd come back with a better one. Because you never inquired, her eyes darted across the room. Faces stopped talking, conversations paused. At mid-lift, everyone was on edge, anticipating the result of the argument Dorian had initiated. Wexley feigned reading a text, Julian Vale attempted to conceal her eavesdropping, while Greg Morrill pretended not to have ridiculed me in front of me. Dorian scurried towards her supervisor and colleagues, whispering, "Dorian, this isn't the right moment." I retorted, keeping my voice steady yet firm, "Now is precisely the time." She was startled by my words, tears glistening in her eyes, but unwilling to fall. Mascara streaked down her cheeks. It was a jest. Dorian attempted to explain, "Dorian, I was merely trying to keep you insignificant." I completed her sentence. She recoiled as if I'd slapped her. A sense of remorse flickered, an old instinct from when I'd allowed her to manipulate my story for her comfort, but the feeling dissipated. "Dorian," she pleaded again, voice wavering, "you know, I didn't mean it that way." I had merely, and what exactly, Isla? I inquired, feeling the burden of each gathering, each meal, every corporate meeting where she had cast me aside so she could take center stage. Merely trying to maintain your narrative, ensuring no flaws were exposed. Her mouth opened, but no words followed. The room stood still, watching as if spectators awaiting a climax. I took a breath and met Wexley's gaze, his complexion still pale. "Mr. Wexley," I said in a measured tone, "expect a communication from my team concerning the acquisition details. We'll get in touch." He gave a stiff nod, his Adam's apple bobbing. Naturally, he complied. I faced Isla once more, her eyes glistening under the too harsh lights. "I've allowed this charade for far too long," I said. Tonight, I reclaimed my voice. Her eyes widened, a tear sliding down. "Dorian, please." But I had spoken my mind. I donned my coat, smoothed the collar, and approached the door. The gathering behind me now seemed diminutive, like a stagecraft left over from a play long concluded. The mirth vanished, and the music felt discordant, a tinny echo misaligned with the palpable unease. Silence reigned outside. The night was calm and cool. I let the door shut softly, its clicks signifying finality. Striding towards the curb, I found my pre-ordered car service idling there, the driver maintaining an impassive gaze straight ahead, politely aloof. "Mr. Ellison?" he inquired, emerging to open the door. I acknowledged with a nod. Yes, the outside world didn't need the spectacle Isla crafted within that room. They didn't require her fabricated drama. As I slid into the back seat, I observed the house shrinking in the glass, the laughter within transforming to hushed murmurs, lights gradually fading under the tranquil hush. The vehicle began its slow withdrawal, revealing the expansive night ahead. My phone chirped with a message from Isla. "Kindly return indoors, please. Let's discuss this matter." For a moment, I gazed at it before shutting off the screen. For years, I had driven her to parties, repaired her faucets, and allowed her to shape our story according to her perspective. I assumed this was love by playing the role she required of me. However, tonight, I discovered something. I no longer required her version of events. The car smoothly navigated the city, streetlights transforming into streaks of gold and white. I observed them, feeling the chill of the night against the glass. No fireworks, no dramatic speech. I didn't feel the need for one. At times, the most powerful statement is exiting gracefully while maintaining dignity. Tomorrow, my assistant would send Wexley a revised contract with updated terms and expectations. Tomorrow, the world would recognize Dorian Ellison, not as Isla's peculiar cousin, but as the man who commanded the room even when he departed in silence. Although the party ended prematurely for me, it felt like the true beginning. The sunbeam intruded upon my office through the blinds, resembling an unwelcome visitor. It highlighted the corners of my polished mahogany desk, my framed diplomas on the wall, and the large glass door dividing me from the world I've crafted over years. I savored my black coffee without sugar, its harshness soothing the tightness in my chest. I didn't need to guess who was approaching. The distinct sound of Isla's heels clicking against the marble floor echoed a military drumbeat, each step signaling her imminent entrance before the door even moved. I steadied myself, placing the mug down intentionally calmly. Before I could extend a polite greeting, she burst open the door. Her hair was pulled back tightly, her jaw tense, a mix of rage and fear reflected in her eyes. She stared at me as if I were a stranger. Perhaps she'd never truly seen me before. "Why didn't you warn me about who you were interacting with?" she accused, her voice edged enough to shatter glass. "Why didn't you inquire about the acquisition, specifically Ellison Dynamics?" I allowed her words to linger, watching them settle like particles on the polished wood separating us. I had anticipated this discussion, but not its immediate arrival nor its intensity. "Since you never inquired," was my calm response. Her lips opened wide, eyes showing surprise. She denied it, frustration seeping through her restraint. "That's unfair, Dorian," she protested. "It's not fair." I clarified, leaning back in my seat. "You asked about the progress of my small tasks, but you never questioned their purpose, their construction, or their impact. You never delved into the real issues." She recoiled as if I had struck her. "You referred to me as your eccentric cousin," I added gently, lowering my voice. "You pushed me into the shadows so you could bask in the limelight. That's the narrative you chose to share." Her fists clenched at her sides. "It was a jest, Dorian," I tried to convey. "To them," I interjected, "it wasn't merely indifference, it was license to trivialize me, and you granted them that liberty. Each time you derided me, each instance where you allowed their misconceptions of my stature to persist, you empowered them." Her gaze locked with mine, tears brimming but unshed. Isla, resilient or dignified, refrained from showing emotion. "I believed we were united," she murmured. A chuckle almost escaped me, but it was silenced within me. "We were," I replied, "until you deemed a companion redundant, until my existence clashed with your narrative, until the reality challenged the tale you constructed." She retreated a step, as if space could insulate her from the impact of my words. "Dorian," she began hesitantly, I I merely sought achievement. I yearned for us too." "Achieve what?" I inquired, my tone even, every word considered. "To radiate, to wield influence. You desired that authority for yourself, Isla. I could see it in your introductions, in your laughter. Year after year, I allowed you to shine, yet tears flowed from your eyes when the truth surfaced, marking black trails through your makeup. You collapsed in the chair facing me, hands quivering. "I didn't realize," you murmured. "I was oblivious to the fact that you were present." I pondered your words, scrutinizing your tear-streaked face. "That's been the issue," I replied. "You never sought understanding." Your gaze rose, red-rimmed eyes pleading. "Now I do," you said. "Please, Dorian, let's resolve this together. We can speak to Wexley jointly." I halted your words with a raised hand. "No," I said gently. "This is my affair. It always has been." Your eyebrows furrowed in confusion. "But you presented me as your peculiar cousin," I explained, my tone echoing the day I sealed Ellison Dynamics' fate by signing the papers that established it from scratch. "You believed yourself secure, assuming I couldn't alter the surroundings." She shook her head, tears streaming faster now. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean." "Isla," I said, my tone decisive, "I'm not angry or hurt any longer. I've simply tired of embodying the character you scripted for me." Her shoulders slumped. She seemed tiny then, fragile, a far cry from the woman who'd once dominated every room she entered. "I'm still your husband," she said, voice quivering. "Doesn't that hold some significance?" I let the quiet stretch, a silence that conveyed everything I couldn't articulate. "It ought to have," I whispered, "but you trained them to overlook me. Now you're discovering the consequences when they finally notice." Her mouth opened, but no words emerged. I rose, fiddling with my cufflinks, a subtle action that underscored my identity. The man who'd constructed an empire. The man who'd mastered letting silence convey more than any apology. This time, she didn't follow me. She remained seated, gazing at the floor as her world disintegrated. I stood motionless at the door, my fingers on the doorknob. "Who's in the room with me, Isla?" I questioned, not anticipating a response. I exited before she had the chance to respond. The office door clicked closed, leaving a hushed finality that resembled an end. The sunlight filtering through the blinds appeared unusually bright, the air pristine. No longer was I her peculiar cousin, I was Dorian Ellison. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid to claim every corner of the room as my own. It didn't take long after that morning for Isla to change course. Ever quick to adapt, rebrand herself, and alter the narrative when focus shifted, she had mastered these skills with colleagues, friends, and family alike, using a winning smile or kind apology to mask uncomfortable truths. But this time, she lacked the same power. She'd lost her script, and she was aware of it. A message arrived barely an hour post my office departure. "We should dine tonight, solely us. No rationale, no regrets. Merely a tranquil request for attention." I chose to disregard it. The second message followed. "Bertrand seems anxious. He requests our joint presence. It might aid in reconsidering the acquisition approach." Knew her use of us. She seldom employed that term unless advantageous. I reread the text, feeling the import of the word echoing through her crafted tone. I remained silent. 3 hours on, she was back at my doorstep, this time adorned in a deliberately chosen blouse and fitted trousers, her hair drawn back neatly into a bun, makeup immaculate, voice composed. I granted entry, yet stood unmoving to greet her. She filled the void, sculpting her discourse, performing the act she'd rehearsed since the party's early conclusion. "Dorian," she commenced, her tone serene and controlled, "I am aware matters have been complicated." I maintained my gaze. "Complex," I repeated, keeping my emotions hidden. She pursed her lips, carefully selecting her words, as if playing a game of chess. "I apologize for introducing you rashly," she said, showing thoughtlessness. "I realize that now." I allowed her to continue, curious to see how she would spin the situation and attempt to fit me back into her plans. However, she went on, leaning forward, "We have a genuine opportunity here. You're in control. The acquisition. The new storyline. It's crucial. For both of us." She paused, waiting for my response. When I remained silent, she persisted, voice soft and insistent. "Wexley wishes to meet with us. He's concerned about the public image, how this might impact the merger. But united." "United," I repeated, tasting the word in my mouth. "By knowing who I am, by knowing my worth." Her eyes widened, but she didn't recoil. She had always been skilled at feigning victimhood when it benefited her. "Dorian, it's not as you think," she said. "I've always had faith in you. I simply didn't." "Didn't what?" I queried, my voice soft. "Didn't recognize you, didn't want to acknowledge you, didn't consider you necessary until you became beneficial for my story once more." She stretched her hand across the desk, her fingers quivering. "Dorian, let's not argue about this. We can rewrite our tale. We can be the admired couple. A power duo. A team." Her voice faltered on the final word, as if she too recognized its inauthenticity. I leaned back in my seat, scrutinizing her. For years, I'd allowed her to craft the story, allowing her to tell everyone who I was and wasn't. I'd nodded at the appropriate moments, yielding the narrative because it maintained harmony. But now, I no longer owed her that concession. "No," I said. The word was brief, but it felt decisive. Her hand fell, her shoulders slumping. "Dorian, please. I require this. We need this. We can. I silenced her with a glance. You need this, I countered. You require me to mend the flaws in your narrative. You desire me to be the man who grins in the pictures, the man who supports you as you narrate our tale. Yet, I am no longer that person. I never was. Her mouth opened, but I saw her grasp the reality that the control she held over me had vanished, that the storyline she penned for us was no longer within my reach. She blinked, tears brimming at her eyes' edges. I'm sorry, she murmured. It wasn't intentional. Regardless of your intentions, I responded. What you did is what matters, and now it's about the choices I make next. Her tears started to fall then, quiet and gradual. What will you do? She inquired, her voice quivering. I stood up, straightening my shirt's front. I'm going to pen my own chapter, I said, and you can write yours. Her lips parted as if to object, but I didn't give her the opportunity. I'm currently wrapping up my own tale, I declared, keeping my tone even yet resolute. Unfortunately, there's no space for the alterations you propose. She visibly winced, her complexion paling. Dorian, please reconsider. However, I'd already begun to walk towards the window. The sun's rays bathed my face as I gazed outside, where the city buzzed with activity cars passing, pedestrians strolling, transactions being sealed, narratives unfolding. For too long, Isla dictated my role in life, deciding how I should fit into her meticulously crafted tale. Not anymore. Beyond me, Isla's voice cracked. Dorian, what will people think of me? I refused to look back. They'll say whatever they wish, I replied softly, and I'll allow it, because their words won't alter my identity. She emitted a soft whimper, but I remained steadfast. In that instant, I recognized that the only narrative significant was the one I was finally crafting for myself, and I wouldn't surrender control to her or anyone else again. The news about the change at Wexley's firm didn't take long to spread among the media. As anticipated, tech and finance reporters were quick to seize any hint of intrigue. What caught me off guard was the speed with which my name made headlines. The initial announcement from Wexley's firm, though carefully worded by lawyers, implied they were in a bit of a pickle. Strategic leadership realignment at Wexley and Company ensures a future of sustainable growth, essentially meant they were taken aback and now were scrambling to respond. The media seized this like a flaming torch. My name, Dorian Ellison, was paired with terms such as unexpected stakeholder, the Spectre founder, and the man who transformed the room. Some articles portrayed me as a silent kingmaker, while others delved into my past with Ellison dynamics, weaving a narrative I hadn't previously shared. Throughout the ordeal, Islaw's face hovered on the outskirts of the story, slightly blurred yet consistently present. Initially, she contacted me in distress. Dorian, they're requesting statements from me. What should I do? I responded calmly. Say whatever you please. I wasn't going to provide a statement. Her breath hitched. You're not going to defend me. After a brief moment, I closed my eyes, reflecting on each time I'd eased her way. Each time, I allowed her to shine while I remained in the background. No, I replied. I won't. The call ended abruptly. A week later, Wexley held a press conference, an effort to reclaim his narrative. They assembled their top executives in a polished conference room, microphones aligned like soldiers. The setting was impeccably corporate, navy blue with the Wexley and Company logo repeated like wallpaper. I watched from the back, a mute bystander. Despite not having intended to attend, curiosity drew me there. Desired to observe their tactic for narrating events, how they'd revise the devastation I caused with a mere mention. Wexley advanced, clearing his throat. His voice remained composed, yet his hands betrayed a tremor. We wish to extend our gratitude to our partners, financiers, and particularly Mr. Dorian Ellison, whose input has been substantial. He paused, scanning the room for an escape. No one stirred. Then he continued, we're optimistic that with our restructuring, we'll be able to progress with honor and unity. Unity. This term once provided them solace, a means to justify actions without bloodshed in their wake. I advanced, not for attention, but because I discovered that the quietest figure often needs to voice opinions. Heads turned, Cameras adjusted. A whisper spread among the audience. "Mr. Ellison?" A woman from finance inquired. "Do you have any thoughts on Wexley's declaration? It is suggested that your unexpected intervention disrupted their entire Q4 strategy." To address this, I locked eyes with her, maintaining a steady and composed demeanor. "Occasionally," I replied, keeping my tone level, "the rooms we step into are already scripted for us. At times, it only requires a name to remind people who truly controls the narrative." Her eyes widened, and she paused, focusing on her notepad. I sensed Isla observing me, although I couldn't see her. Another journalist leaned in, exhibiting eagerness. "Mr. Ellison, is it accurate that you attended a corporate event as a relation to your own spouse? Is this where things began?" A ripple of laughter swept through the room, but I remained unfazed. I faced him squarely. "Sometimes," I said, "those closest to us fail to recognize the aspects of us they cannot perceive, and sometimes that's the most valuable advantage a man can possess." More pens scratched, more cameras clicked. A fourth voice, more tentative, queried, "Mister, do you have any comments on allegations that you attended a company gathering as a family member to your spouse? Is there any impact on your relationship with Wexley and the company after this experience? Additionally, how has this incident influenced your connection with your wife?" I asked, but you remained unfazed. "Regarding Wexley and the firm, it's improved significantly. Our understanding of each other's roles is now more crystal clear. Concerning my wife," I hesitated, allowing the silence to deepen. "It seems that she is the one who determines which narrative she wishes to share." The room grew quiet, a silence born from spoken truths and uncertainties about what should follow next. Without delay, I acknowledged the reporters and Wexley before departing. Just as I approached the door, a young reporter with eager eyes and a quivering voice piped up. "Mr. Ellison," she said, "your comment about being misunderstood has spread rapidly. Investors now refer to you as the ghost founder who became a legend overnight. What does it feel like?" I pondered, my hand on the door, absorbing her words. The overlooked specter, the man they underestimated until he emerged from the shadows. Turning around, our eyes met. "It feels fitting," I responded. "At times, the labels people impose are merely reflections of their limited comprehension. If I can utilize this label to unlock opportunities for others who've been underestimated, then I will wear it with pride." The room echoed with a whirlwind of inquiries, but I chose not to respond. Outside, the sun bathed my face, a refreshing gust dissipating the remaining tension from my shoulders. Isla would read the headlines, hear the sound bites, and understand that the man she tried to keep subdued is now the name on everyone's lips. Perhaps, just perhaps, she might recognize that the tale she sought to control has been rewritten by the man she once called her peculiar cousin, and I wouldn't return. The day following the press conference, my phone was bombarded with notifications, illuminating its screen like a strobe light. My name was everywhere: tech blogs, financial journals, and even mainstream media outlets that typically couldn't decipher Ellison dynamics were labeling me as the elusive founder who stirred up the boardroom. I had become the man behind the curtain, but now the curtain had been removed, and every camera wanted a glimpse of my face. I had never valued such attention. I had constructed Ellison Dynamics from an old Dell laptop and a second-hand coffee pot in a studio apartment. I had coded late into the night, negotiated with investors who looked at me as if I was wasting their time. Every line of code, every sleepless night, every contract signed were pieces of me. It was this aspect that Isla never witnessed, the foundation she would often mock when she called me eccentric. She always preferred her portrayal of me, the man in sweatpants with coffee stains on his shirt. She believed it to be secure, an individual she could isolate and portray as harmless. Yet, with the Globe summoning me and investors inquiring about Ellison Dynamics' future plans, her plan crumbled apart. On a Thursday, the concept for the eccentric branch initiative struck me. I was seated at my desk, my mug of black coffee growing cold by my side, as emails poured in like an unwanted tide. Some were congratulatory messages from old college acquaintances who had suddenly remembered knowing me. Others were predatory CEOs and investors hoping to capitalize on the recent headlines. but one message resonated with me. It was from a young entrepreneur, barely 22 years old, managing a small team trying to launch a sustainable housing prototype. The subject line read, "They doubted my seriousness." His message was heartfelt, despair evident in every word. He had been ridiculed at a business meeting by men in tailored suits who deemed him unsuitable due to his image. He appreciated my statement during the press conference about labels, about being underestimated, as it made him feel less alone in his predicament. I reread the message twice, then thrice. This was a sentiment Isla never grasped. It was the sensation of being excluded from your own gathering, of being ignored because shoes weren't polished, because language wasn't spoken, because one didn't fit the predefined mold. She had meticulously crafted her brand for years, but she hadn't known the struggle to secure a place at the table. I recalled my initial experience in that boardroom filled with 7 men in suits who questioned if I was the it support. Back then, I learned that the most effective way to triumph was to allow them to believe I didn't belong, and then seal the deal before their very eyes. The email from the young entrepreneur sparked a desire within me to create something. For individuals similar to him, and for me something not concerned with the correct attire, pitch, or label. A venue where concepts held more value than appearances. So I contacted my assistant, Eva, a woman who'd witnessed the inception of Ellison Dynamics from a solitary server rack in a rented closet. She answered immediately. "Good day, Dorian," she chirped. "How may I assist you?" I replied, feeling the words emerge with a conviction as solid as steel within me. "I wish to establish a mentorship fund, something modest initially. A platform where young entrepreneurs can present an idea and acquire the essential tools to construct it." After a brief silence, there was a discernible smile over the phone line. "What would you like to name it?" I pondered for a moment before responding. "The Unconventional Initiative," I suggested, as a nod to what they once called me in rooms where they believed I didn't belong. Eva chuckled softly, her laughter comforting and knowledgeable. "Excellent," she said. "Today, I'll commence with the necessary paperwork." By midday, I had visualized my ideas on a whiteboard, small grants, mentorship programs, and community networking initiatives. My ultimate goal is to create a resource hub that others, like myself, have struggled to find. In the afternoon, I met with a business magazine for an interview, which had been persistently contacting me throughout the week. The interviewer, Layla, questioned me about my unusual venture. Her eyes sparkled as I elucidated the idea, and by the end of our conversation, she was hurriedly jotting down notes with a speed that made her pen appear blurred. "What's the significance behind the name?" she asked, her curiosity palpable. I sat back in my chair, allowing the words to resonate before responding. "I chose that name," I explained, "because people often label what they don't comprehend. They may call you eccentric, peculiar, or unique, as it's simpler than acknowledging their lack of understanding. However, sometimes that label can serve as a stepping stone for others. If given the chance, I would bear the label with honor." She fell into a brief spell of amazement before querying, "Was that label ever an obstacle for you?" With a calm, deliberate smile, I responded, "No, it provided me with an edge." For while they doubted my abilities, I was constructing something they couldn't perceive. The quote quickly spread like wildfire across the internet. My social media feeds and inbox filled with screenshots of it, people thanking me for making them feel understood. I found myself reflecting on Isla, likely engrossed by her phone somewhere, as she watched her carefully crafted image lose its grip. She had built her persona around power and perfection, aiming to convince the world that she was the protagonist in every tale. Yet, ironically, the very foundation she scoffed at became what the world wished to stand upon. 2 days later, I received a message from her. A single line. "Does your unconventional project offer space for us?" I chose not to respond because some bridges aren't designed for those who sought to demolish them. Instead of conveying the information, I phoned Eva and instructed her to initiate the initial grant distribution from the fund. When journalists inquired about it, I opted for a straightforward response. "Sometimes the world attempts to define you," I stated. "They try to diminish, categorize, and undervalue you. However, if you establish your foundation, if you control it, they can never take it away. This statement also gained traction online. As headlines shifted from Isla's quirky relative to the creator who built the bridge, I could feel in my office, the place she called my small lab, the weight of her laughter lessen. For, in the end, the foundation she scoffed at had transformed into the one that brought about significant change. As time progressed, the headlines calmed down. The viral quotes disappeared from social media feeds as the world pursued fresh narratives. Yet, traces remained. My name surfaced in boardrooms, my image in news articles, and my words displayed on the screens of youngsters who once felt the same way I did, overlooked, underestimated, overshadowed. Initially, I didn't aim to be a hero or icon, yet my silence morphed into a powerful expression for those who were told they weren't welcome. I bore this responsibility as I had faced every challenge before, with steadfastness, resilience, and determination to make a difference. Isla stopped responding after 3 unanswered messages. Her last message was an extensive, well-crafted apology that exuded her usual calculated, curated, and composed demeanor. I didn't reply, not out of indifference, but because I cared. Because for too long, she had molded my silence to fit her story. I didn't need her apology. I didn't need her recognition or validation. Because for the first time, I realized that my worth wasn't something she could bestow or take away. It was a Tuesday morning with gray skies, my coffee growing cold beside me, the muted hum of the city providing a comforting white noise when I encountered her in the cafe. She wasn't supposed to be there. My intention was to meet a young entrepreneur from the Eccentric Branch Initiative, a lively fellow named Javier who possessed a prototype for a water filtration system that could save lives. However, Isla was already seated at a corner table, staring intently at the door. She appeared diminutive in the morning light, devoid of any carefully applied makeup or bold lipstick. Merely Isla, the woman I once held dear, the one who had once presented me as her eccentric cousin. Upon my entry, she rose, and her face lit up with something akin to hope. "Dorian," she whispered, her voice quivering, I wasn't certain you'd show." I hesitated at the entrance, scrutinizing her. She had always been adept at sensing the atmosphere, adjusting her demeanor, and employing the perfect tone for each situation. Yet, this time she seemed exposed, vulnerable, even. I politely nodded, not unkindly. "I have an appointment," I stated, "with a member from the initiative, specifically a person called Minty." Her gaze shifted towards a table where a notebook lay open, a pen balanced on it like an incomplete idea. "I read about Javier," she admitted. "He's quite remarkable." I returned a sincere and soft smile. "He certainly is." She hesitated, biting her lip. "Dorian, Aya." I halted her with a raised hand. "Your name is Isla," I said softly. "You don't need to say it." Tears gathered in her eyes, yet she blinked them back skillfully. "But I wish to," she whispered. "I didn't mean to." "To what?" I asked, keeping my voice calm but firm. "To belittle you? To marginalize you in your own life? To present you as my quirky relative while I expanded my empire on your silence?" She flinched, and I could see genuine pain in her eyes this time. Not the acted-out pain she displayed at social functions. "I was wrong," she confessed, voice cracking. "I wanted to shine, Dorian. I desired to be significant, and I assumed minimizing you would magnify me." The void resonated with suppressed realities between us. "You were," I admitted eventually, "for a while. Then your tears flowed incessantly." "I apologize," you murmured. "I'm deeply sorry." I nodded without rancor, and for the first time, I felt no rage, no resentment. Only a tranquil understanding filled me. "I understand," I said, "and I forgive you." You looked hopeful, your eyes alight. Perhaps we could." I shook my head gently. "No," I replied, "we cannot. For you are not the antagonist in my narrative, Isla. You're simply not the protagonist either." Your lips quivered. Yet, Dorian, I retrieved a folded note from my pocket. It was a letter, penned by hand, meticulous. The ink smeared at some points where I'd clutched the pen too forcefully. I'd written it weeks prior, on a night when memories felt too burdensome to bear alone. I offered it to you. "Read this when you're prepared," I said. She received the unspoken phrase with trembling fingers and wide eyes. "Dorian?" she questioned, yet I had already walked away. Javier stood by a window-side table, grinning, his design rough sketches in an old notebook. I approached him, leaving Isla behind. Upon reaching the table, Javier rose, extending his hand. "Mr. Ellison," he expressed, his voice filled with excitement. "I can hardly believe you're here, despite knowing your promise." I shook his hand firmly. "I keep my promises," I replied, smiling. His eyes sparkled in return. "I'm at a loss for how to thank you." "Don't," I said, taking my seat. "Just demonstrate what you've constructed." He opened the notebook, his hands shaking. "It's a filtration system," he explained, finding composure as he spoke. "Portable, affordable, designed for communities lacking access to clean water. It may not be flashy, but I leaned in, my gaze fixed on him. "But it's crucial," I affirmed. What truly mattered, as he elucidated the specifics, an inner calm enveloped me. A serene pride swelled within me, emanating from the construction of the bridge and the solid base I had established. It wasn't merely for my benefit, but for him, and for every child who had been dismissed as too small, too unique, too unconventional. In the background, Isla remained secluded, holding the letter, her silent sobs concealed from the world's gaze. She was gifted at weaving tales, at crafting narratives. However, this tale belonged to me, and the unsaid words I left hanging were penned in the silence I had claimed. For not all triumphs are achieved through powerful speeches or viral sayings. Some are earned in tranquil instances, in the persistent reconstruction of a life according to one's own design. And in that cafe, with Javier's prototype standing between us, I knew I had already prevailed.